The day she broke my heart started like any other. I was adjusting my tie in the mirror, practicing my vows under my breath, and worrying about weather forecasts. I had no idea that in 6 hours I'd be standing in the shadows of our wedding venue watching Mia, my fiancée of 3 years, reading her vows to my best friend. Not to me, to him. Her hands trembled as she held the paper, her voice breaking on every other word. I remember thinking how beautiful she looked, even as she was tearing my life apart. The golden hour sunlight streamed through the windows of Hillcrest Manor, the historic property I'd spent my life savings to purchase just 2 months ago, bathing them both in amber light like some cruel divine blessing. Everyone was there, her parents with their stunned expressions, my mother clutching her chest, our wedding party frozen in horror. Nobody moved, nobody stopped it, and I just stood there, like some pathetic spectator at my own execution. When she finished, there was no applause, just a suffocating silence. Then James, my best friend since college, reached for her hand. That's when I walked out, found the property deed in my car, and made the most impulsive decision of my life. I signed Hillcrest Manor over to them, the perfect wedding gift for the perfect betrayal. Here's the kicker, though. I don't regret it, not really, because that's how my story began, not ended. Let me back up. My name is Ethan Mercer, and until 6 months ago, I was a real estate developer with a knack for finding undervalued historic properties. I was also madly in love with Mia Callahan, an environmental lawyer with a smile that could power small cities. We met at a contentious town hall meeting where she was fighting against one of my projects. She called me a soulless corporate drone in front of a crowd of concerned citizens. I asked her to coffee immediately afterward. That's us in a nutshell. I always loved the fire in her, even when it burned me. For 3 years, we were that annoying couple everyone both envies and finds slightly irritating. We finished each other's sentences, had inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else, and genuinely believed we'd found our person. We even had a golden retriever named Roosevelt, Rosie for short, that we co-parented with embarrassing enthusiasm. James Coleman was my roommate in college, my business partner afterward, and the best man at what should have been my wedding. He was also the guy who taught me how to tie a tie, who got me through my father's funeral, and who invested in my first property when no one else would. "You've got a good eye, Ethan," he told me once. "You see the value in things other people miss." Ironic, considering I missed what was happening right in front of me. The first sign came about 4 months before the wedding. Mia started working late on a major case, a class action against a chemical company. Nothing unusual there. Both our careers demanded long hours. But there was a new distance in her eyes that I attributed to stress. "You good?" I asked one night as she crawled into bed at 1 a.m. "Just tired," she murmured, keeping to her side of the bed. "This case is complicated." I should have pressed harder, should have noticed how she no longer reached for me in her sleep, should have questioned why James suddenly needed less of my input on our joint projects. But I was consumed with my latest acquisition. Hillcrest Manor, built in 1897, it was a crumbling Victorian estate on 30 acres just outside the city. The price was steep, but I had a vision. Restore it as a wedding venue and high-end retreat, starting with our own ceremony. It was meant to be a surprise for Mia, something that combined her love of historical architecture with my eye for potential. "You're distracted lately," Mia noted one Sunday morning as we walked Rosie through the park. "Is everything okay with work?" I grinned, barely containing my excitement. "Actually, I have something big in the works. Something that might change everything for us." Her smile faltered, just for a second. "Change?" "The good kind," I assured her, squeezing her hand. "A surprise?" She nodded but didn't squeeze back. Another sign I missed. 2 weeks later, I brought her to Hillcrest. The March air was crisp, the ground still dormant from winter, but the structure stood proud against the pale blue sky. I watched her face as we drove up the long, tree-lined approach, waiting for the amazement, the joy. Instead, she looked stricken. "This is yours?" she asked. "Ours," I corrected, mistaking her shock for awe. "I bought it, for us. For the wedding, actually. I thought we could have it here and then turn it into a business afterward." "Ethan." Her voice held a warning I didn't understand. "Come on. Let me show you inside. It needs work, but wait until you see the staircase. It's perfect for your entrance." I practically pulled her from the car, too caught up in my vision to register her reluctance. We walked through dusty rooms with high ceilings and intricate moldings. I pointed out original details and outlined renovation plans. I was selling her on my dream, but with every enthusiastic description, she seemed to retreat further into herself. In the grand ballroom, beneath a chandelier that had once illuminated debutante balls, I finally noticed her tears. "Mia, what's wrong? If you hate it—" "I don't hate it," she whispered, hugging herself. "It's beautiful, too beautiful." Relief washed over me. "You had me worried for a second. So you can see it? Us getting married here?" She looked at me then, really looked at me, with an expression I now recognize as guilt mingled with pity. "I need to tell you something," she said. My phone rang, James calling about a contractor issue at another property. I held up a finger to Mia, answered quickly, and promised to call back. "Sorry, what were you saying?" I asked, pocketing my phone. She hesitated, then shook her head. "Nothing. It's perfect, Ethan, really?" That night, I caught her crying in the bathroom, the shower running to mask the sound. When I knocked, she composed herself and claimed it was wedding stress. I believed her because I wanted to, because the alternative was unthinkable. The weeks that followed were a blur of renovation work, permit applications, and wedding preparations. Mia threw herself into the details with unexpected intensity, as if checking items off a list meant everything would fall into place. Meanwhile, James became increasingly difficult to reach, canceling our regular racquetball games and begging off dinner invitations. "He's just giving us space before the wedding," Mia suggested when I mentioned it. "Plus, he's handling all your shared projects while you focus on Hillcrest." I accepted this explanation, grateful for his support. I even asked him to meet me at Hillcrest to discuss some design elements for the ceremony. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for this," he said when I showed him the ballroom. "Shouldn't you be asking Mia?" "She's swamped with this case, and besides, you know her taste almost as well as I do." He flinched at that, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, Ethan, about the wedding—" "Oh, before I forget," I interrupted. "I had an idea for your best man speech. Remember that camping trip where I nearly burned down the forest trying to impress that girl from the next campsite?" James stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Yeah, I remember. Well, I thought, I can't do this," he said suddenly, turning away. "The speech? That's fine, it was just a suggestion." "No, not the speech, any of it. I'm sorry, Ethan." Before I could respond, he walked out, leaving me confused in the echoing ballroom. I called Mia immediately. "Something's up with James," I said when she answered. "He's acting weird about the wedding." The silence on her end stretched too long. "Mia?" "We need to talk," she finally said. "Tonight." But that night, she called to say she was stuck in a deposition and wouldn't be home until late. The next morning, she left before I woke up. This pattern continued for nearly a week, and when we were together, conversation remained superficial, avoiding anything wedding-related. Finally, 10 days before the ceremony, I confronted her. "Are you having second thoughts?" I asked as she packed her briefcase one morning. Her hand stilled. About what? Us. The wedding. Any of it? She closed her eyes briefly. No, Ethan, I'm not having second thoughts. Then what's going on? And don't say nothing because we've barely spoken in days. She zipped her briefcase with finality. I have the rehearsal dinner tonight. We'll talk then. That's not until 7. I know, but I need to prepare what I'm going to say. Cold dread settled in my stomach. That sounds ominous. She attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It's not. I promise. I want to get the words right. I let her go because I didn't know what else to do, because part of me was afraid of what those carefully prepared words might be. Instead, I drove to Hillcrest to check on the final touches for the rehearsal that evening. The coordinator was there, reviewing seating arrangements and confirming timing with the catering staff. Everything was coming together exactly as planned, which made the hollow feeling in my chest all the more confusing. I wandered through rooms that now gleamed with fresh paint and polished floors, trying to recapture the excitement I'd felt when purchasing the property. But all I could think about was Mia's distance, James's avoidance, and the growing certainty that something was terribly wrong. By 6 that evening, guests had begun to arrive. Immediate family and the wedding party only, as tradition dictated. My mother fussed over my tie while telling me how proud my father would have been. Mia's parents made polite conversation but seemed tense, exchanging glances I couldn't interpret. At 6:45, the coordinator approached me, her professional smile strained. Mr. Mercer, we have a situation. Miss Callahan has requested a change to the rehearsal schedule. She'd like to read her vows now before the walkthrough. Before? That's not how it works. I understand, sir, but she was quite insistent. Everyone is gathering in the ballroom. Bewildered but willing to accommodate whatever would ease Mia's apparent anxiety, I agreed. Walking into the ballroom, I immediately sensed something was off. The wedding party was arranged not in processional order, but in a loose semicircle. James stood in the center, looking sick. Mia was beside him, clutching a piece of paper, her knuckles white. I moved to take my place beside her, but she shook her head slightly. Confused, I stepped back, watching as she unfolded the paper with trembling hands. I've asked you all here, she began, her voice barely audible, because I need to be honest. These are my vows, but they aren't for Ethan. The room went silent. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. James, she continued, turning to face him, I never meant for this to happen. We never meant to hurt anyone, especially not Ethan. I remember very little of what she said after that. Something about unexpected feelings, about fighting it, about realizing life was too short for half measures. Words like connection and undeniable and forgiveness floated past me. What I do remember clearly is James's face, a mixture of agony and relief, and the way Mia's voice steadied as she continued, as if each word relieved her of a burden while simultaneously transferring it to me. When she finished, no one moved. No one seemed to breathe. I stood perfectly still, aware of every eye in the room avoiding mine. It was my mother who broke the silence, crossing to me with murder in her eyes. Ethan, we're leaving. Now. But I couldn't move. How long? I asked, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. Mia and James exchanged a glance. 6 months, James finally admitted. It started during the Carlton project. 6 months. While I was planning our future, securing our wedding venue, they were... I nodded once, turned, and walked out. Not running, not stomping, just walking, as if leaving a business meeting that had gone slightly over schedule. In my car, I sat staring at the mansion I'd poured my savings and dreams into, The property deed was in the glove compartment. I'd planned to show it to Mia after the rehearsal, to officially put it in both our names. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was spite. Maybe it was some perverse desire to give them the one thing I couldn't have, a clean conscience. Whatever the reason, I took out the deed, signed the transfer papers I'd already prepared, and walked back inside. They were still there, the entire group frozen in the same tableau of horror. Without a word, I placed the deed and transfer documents on a nearby table, nodded once at the group, and left. That should have been the end of the story. The pathetic guy who gave away a small fortune to the people who betrayed him. But life is messier than that, and endings rarely happen when or how we expect them to. I spent that night in a hotel, ignoring calls and texts that gradually evolved from frantic to concerned to resigned. The next morning I checked out and drove with no destination in mind, eventually finding myself at a coastal town 3 hours from home. For 2 days, I walked beaches and sat in anonymous bars, replaying every moment of my relationship with Mia, every interaction with James, searching for clues I'd missed. There were plenty, once I knew to look for them, changed passwords, new inside jokes I wasn't part of, the careful way they avoided being alone together in group settings. On the 3rd day, I called my mother. "Oh, thank God," she breathed when she heard my voice. "Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm fine," I lied. "Just needed some space. How's Rosie?" "She's here with me, missing you terribly. Ethan, what you did with the property." "I don't want to talk about that." "Well, you should know they didn't accept it. James came by looking for you with the papers. Said he couldn't possibly take it." Something bitter and satisfied twisted in my chest. "His problem, not mine. I signed it over." "Ethan Alexander Mercer, you listen to me. That property represents years of your hard work. Your father would be ashamed to see you throw it away over pride." "It's not pride," I protested, though perhaps it was. "It's closure." My mother's sigh carried decades of maternal exasperation. "There's no such thing as closure, honey. There's just life, and how we choose to live it after disappointment." After promising to return soon, I hung up and stared at the ocean, considering her words. She was right, of course. Giving away Hillcrest was a gesture born of shock and pain, not rational thought. But I couldn't face going back for it, couldn't face them, and a week later I returned to the city but avoided my apartment, staying instead with a former colleague. I collected Rosie from my mother and found temporary office space to sort out my business affairs. James's name was on too many documents, our professional lives as entangled as our personal ones had been. The first time my lawyer mentioned selling my share of our joint properties back to James, I balked. "I'd rather sell to a stranger," I said. She regarded me with clinical patience. "At a significant loss, given market conditions and the specialized nature of these investments, Mr. Coleman's offer is more than fair." "I don't care about fair. I care about being done with him. Being done with him means accepting his money, unless you'd prefer prolonged negotiations with multiple parties while remaining legally tied to him." Put that way, the choice was simple. I authorized the sale, refusing to attend the closing and having documents messengered instead. The money hit my account. A small fortune, truthfully, but brought no satisfaction. 2 weeks after the non-wedding, I finally returned to the apartment to collect my things. I'd arranged for Mia to be elsewhere, but as I was boxing up books, the door opened. She stood in the entryway, hesitant and pale. Rosie, the traitor, bounded over to greet her enthusiastically. "I thought you'd be gone by now," I said, continuing to pack. I switched shifts with a colleague. She knelt to pet Rosie, then straightened. "You left your phone behind. A lot of people are worried." "I bought a new one." She nodded, hovering awkwardly in her own home. "Ethan, about Hillcrest." "Keep it," I cut her off. Consider it a wedding present. We're not getting married. That stopped me. I looked up, genuinely surprised. What? She sat on the edge of the sofa, as far from me as possible. After what we did to you, it didn't feel right to just move forward. We're taking some time. I barked out a laugh. How noble of you. It's not nobility, I don't know what it is. She ran a hand through her hair, a gesture so familiar it hurt. Everything's a mess. James won't even speak to me most days. He says he can't look at me without seeing your face when I read those vows. Sounds like a you problem. I sealed a box with more force than necessary. Actually sounds like exactly what you both deserve. I know that, she said quietly. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Good, because you won't get it. She nodded, accepting this. I still want you to take back Hillcrest. It's yours. You loved that place before everything. And now I don't. Funny how betrayal changes things. She flinched but pressed on. Then sell it, but don't just give it away because you're hurt and angry. I'm not angry, I lied. I'm done. With the property, with this conversation, with you and James and this whole situation. Ethan, I need you to leave so I can finish packing. After a moment's hesitation, she stood. I never meant to hurt you. And yet, when she was gone, I sat on the floor beside Rosie, my hand buried in her fur. Was I really that blind girl? I whispered. Rosie licked my face in response, loyal to the last. That night, in my sterile, extended-stay hotel room, I pulled out the one thing of Mia's I'd taken. A photo of us from our first vacation together, laughing on a beach in Mexico. I stared at our happy faces until they blurred, trying to pinpoint the exact moment when that happiness became a lie. But there was no single moment, just a gradual erosion I'd been too preoccupied to notice. The next morning, I called my lawyer again. The Hillcrest Manor situation, I began without preamble. Has anything been filed? No, she replied. Mr. Coleman refuses to process the paperwork. It remains in your name. I exhaled slowly. What would it take to sell it? To sell? Nothing unusual. It's commercially zoned, partially renovated. Despite the current market, its historical designation makes it desirable. I could have offers within a week. Do it. Selling Hillcrest became my focus, a tangible goal to move toward while the rest of my life remained in shambles. I toured it with realtors, pointing out original features and renovation potential with professional detachment, as if I hadn't once carried Mia across its threshold, promising her the moon and stars. A hotel chain expressed interest, planning to gut most of the interior for modern amenities. An investment group proposed condominiums. Each offer felt wrong, a desecration of something that, despite everything, I still cared about. 3 weeks after listing the property, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. Is this Ethan Mercer? A woman's voice asked. Speaking. My name is Carolina Winters. I'm interested in Hillcrest Manor, but not through conventional channels. I'd like to discuss it with you directly, if you're willing. Intrigued despite myself, I agreed to meet her at a downtown cafe. Carolina proved to be a formidable woman in her 60s, impeccably dressed with the confident air of old money. Thank you for meeting me, she said, ordering tea for both of us. I'll be direct. I grew up in Hillcrest Manor. My father was forced to sell it when I was 16 due to financial difficulties, and I've spent 40 years regretting that we couldn't keep it in the family. I wasn't aware the previous owners had such a connection to the property. I'm not the previous owner, Mr. Mercer. My family lost it in 1975. It's changed hands 7 times since then. She sipped her tea, studying me. I've made inquiries about you. You have a reputation for thoughtful restoration work, for seeing the potential in historic properties without destroying their character. That's why I was devastated to hear you planned to sell to Meridian Hotels. They made a competitive offer, I said neutrally. They'll destroy everything that makes Hillcrest special, she countered. I'm prepared to match their offer with one condition. I want you to manage the restoration and future operations of the property. I stared at her. Miss Winters, I appreciate your interest, but I'm planning to leave the area. Selling Hillcrest is part of that process. Running away, you mean? Her directness was startling. I've also heard rumors about why the planned wedding never occurred. Small towns and all that. Heat rose in my face. With all due respect, that's none of your business. No, it's not, she agreed easily. But that property is my business, or I want it to be. And while I'm sorry for your personal difficulties, I'd hate to see Hillcrest suffer for them. Hillcrest is a building, Miss Winters. It doesn't have feelings. She smiled slightly. Spoken like someone who's never truly loved a place. Buildings hold memories, Mr. Mercer. They witness our lives. Hillcrest has seen weddings and funerals, births and deaths, celebrations and heartbreaks for over a century. It deserves better than corporate homogenization. Despite myself, I was moved by her passion. What exactly are you proposing? A partnership. I provide the capital, you provide the expertise. We restore Hillcrest to its former glory as an events venue and retreat, as you originally intended. I get to reconnect with my family legacy. You get to complete a project you obviously care about. And Hillcrest gets to continue its story. Why me? There are plenty of restoration specialists. Because you already have a vision for the place, and frankly, because I think you need this as much as I do. She leaned forward. Don't let what happened define your relationship with that beautiful property. Don't let them take that from you, too. Her words hit with uncomfortable precision. Was I really willing to abandon Hillcrest, to let it become another casualty of Mia and James's betrayal? I need time to think, I said finally. Carolina nodded, passing me her card. Take all the time you need, but not so much that Meridian closes the deal. That evening, I drove out to Hillcrest, parking at the end of the long driveway to avoid being seen. The building stood silhouetted against the twilight sky, windows dark, grounds overgrown from weeks of neglect. I'd invested so much in this place, not just money, but dreams and hopes and plans for a future that no longer existed. As I sat there, headlights appeared behind me. A car pulled up, and to my dismay, James stepped out. He spotted me immediately. "Ethan," he said, approaching cautiously. "I thought that was your car." "What are you doing here?" I demanded. He shoved his hands in his pockets, looking as uncomfortable as I felt. "I come here sometimes. To think." "About what? How to betray your next friend?" He accepted this with a slight wince. "I deserved that." "You deserve a lot worse." We stood in charged silence, the weight of our shared history hanging between us. "I tried to return the deed," he finally said. "Multiple times." "I know. I never wanted your property, Ethan. I never wanted to hurt you at all." A harsh laugh escaped me. "Funny way of showing it, sleeping with my fiancée." James looked at the ground. "I know there's nothing I can say that will fix this. I need you to know that it wasn't planned. We didn't set out to hurt you." "That's supposed to make me feel better? That you destroyed my life accidentally?" "No," he admitted. "Nothing will make you feel better right now. I get that." "You don't get anything about what I'm feeling." He nodded, accepting this. "Fair enough. But for what it's worth, we're both miserable too. Mia can barely look at herself in the mirror, and I—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Well, I just came to say goodbye to this place. I heard about the Meridian offer." "How did you hear about that?" "Small town. Word gets around." He looked up at the manor. "It's a shame. This place suited you. Your vision for it, I mean." Like you care. I do care, Ethan. About you, about what happens to your work. That hasn't changed, even if everything else has. I wanted to punch him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand an explanation for how he could have done this, how they both could have chosen each other over basic human decency. Instead, I just felt tired. I met with a potential buyer today, I said, surprising myself with the disclosure. Carolina Winters. Says her family used to own the place. James looked surprised. The Winters family? They were practically local royalty back in the day. What's her offer? She wants a partnership. She finances, I manage. Are you considering it? I shrugged. I was planning to leave town. Because of us, he said. Not a question. Oh, wouldn't you? He considered this. Probably. But running never solved anything, trust me on that. Right. Because I should definitely take life advice from you now. James accepted the barb without comment. After a moment, he said, You know what made you such a good developer? You always saw the potential in these old places. The stories they could tell. Don't let what happened stop you from finishing this one. Before I could respond, he turned and walked back to his car. For what it's worth, I'm sorry, Ethan. More than you'll ever know. I watched him drive away, conflicted emotions churning within me. His words, infuriatingly, echoed Carolina's. Was I really going to abandon my vision for Hillcrest just to avoid painful reminders? That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Hillcrest, about the grand staircase where Mia should have descended in her wedding gown, about the ballroom where she had instead confessed her betrayal. But I also thought about the gardens that could be restored, the original kitchen with its massive hearth, the widow's walk with views for miles. In the morning, I called Carolina. I'm interested in your proposal, I said when she answered, but I have conditions. I expected nothing less. Shall we discuss over breakfast? Over the next week, Carolina and I hammered out terms. I would oversee restoration and manage operations for 5 years, with an option to buy her out afterward. We would preserve as many original elements as possible, while updating systems to modern standards. The name would remain Hillcrest Manor, with no reference to the Winters family in marketing materials, a concession she made reluctantly, but accepted. This feels right, she said as we signed the final agreement. Hillcrest coming back to life, not as a monument to the past, but as something new built on old foundations. Her metaphor wasn't lost on me. Perhaps that's what I was doing too, building something new from the wreckage of what came before. Work began immediately. I moved into a small cottage on the property, supervising contractors from dawn till dusk, losing myself in the details of restoration. At night, I researched period-appropriate fixtures and furnishings, created operational plans, and gradually, painfully, began rebuilding my life. Word spread quickly about the project. Local media covered the restoration of a historic gem. Interviews that carefully avoided mentioning why my wedding never took place there. Most people in town knew anyway, the story having achieved near-mythic status in local gossip. 3 months into the restoration, as workers were repairing the grand staircase, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Ethan, it's Mia. My hand tightened on the phone. How did you get this number? Your mother, she admitted. I've been helping her with some legal issues, and she thought we should talk. There's nothing to talk about. Please, Ethan, just coffee? 10 minutes of your time? I should have said no. Would have, if not for the tremor in her voice that reminded me of the woman I'd once loved beyond reason. Fine, 1 coffee. We met at a cafe far from our old haunts. She was already there when I arrived, fidgeting with a napkin, looking smaller than I remembered. She stood when she saw me, an uncertain smile flickering across her face. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat across from her. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. "You look good," she offered. "The papers say Hillcrest is coming along well." "It is." She took a breath. "I'm moving to Seattle. I've accepted a position with an environmental law firm there." This was unexpected. "What about James?" Pain flashed across her face. "That's over. Has been for a while." "I can't say I'm sorry to hear that." "I wouldn't expect you to be." She twisted her napkin tighter. "We tried, after everything. But there was too much guilt, too much hurt. Every time we were together, we both thought of you." "Sounds romantic." She flinched but continued. "I wanted to see you before I left. To apologize again, properly. What we did was unforgivable, and I've had to live with that knowledge every day. The way we handled it, especially at the rehearsal, I have no excuse." "Why did you do it that way?" I asked, the question that had haunted me. "Why not just tell me privately?" She looked down. "Cowardice, partly. I kept trying to find the right moment, but there never was one. And then when you bought Hillcrest..." She shook her head. "I panicked. I thought if everyone was there, I wouldn't back out again. It was selfish and cruel, and I will regret it for the rest of my life." I sat with this, processing. "And now you're leaving." "Yes, fresh start. James is staying, his business is here, but I need to be somewhere else." "What about Rosie?" A small smile. "I was hoping she could stay with you. She always loved you more anyway." This, oddly, was what threatened to break me. The final dissolution of our little family. The last thread snapped. "I'll take her," I said, voice tight. Mia nodded, relief evident. "Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "I heard about your partnership with Carolina Winters. It sounds perfect for you." "It's working out. I'm glad. You deserve that, Ethan. To finish what you started. To make something beautiful." We sat in silence, the weight of all we'd been and lost hanging between us. "I should go," she said finally. "My flight is tomorrow." I nodded, rising with her. For a moment we stood awkwardly. 3 years of intimacy reduced to the tentative distance of strangers. "Goodbye, Ethan. I hope life gives you everything you deserve." As she turned to leave, I found my voice. "Mia." She paused, hope flickering across her face. "I don't forgive you," I said quietly. "But I hope you find whatever you're looking for in Seattle." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. A release, perhaps, for both of us. After she left, I sat alone, surprised to find I felt lighter. Not healed, that would take much longer, but as if a tightly wound spring inside me had loosened slightly. That evening, I walked the grounds of Hillcrest as the setting sun gilded the newly repaired roof. Workers had uncovered an old stone path behind the house, leading to what might have once been a kitchen garden. I followed it, envisioning herbs and vegetables growing there again, fresh produce for events and retreats. My phone buzzed with a text from Carolina. "Good news! The Historical Society has approved our renovation plans. Celebration dinner tomorrow?" I smiled, despite myself. Carolina had become not just a business partner, but something of a mentor over the past months. Her no-nonsense attitude and clear vision had given me something to focus on beyond my pain. "Count me in," I texted back. As I continued my walk, I found myself mentally designing the garden, planning where each bed would go, what varieties would thrive in this soil. For the first time in months, I was thinking about building something instead of just surviving. Rosie moved in with me the next day, bringing chaos to my meticulously organized cottage. She sniffed every corner, claimed the best spot on the sofa, and looked at me with such unabashed joy that something cracked open in my chest. "Just you and me now, girl," I told her, scratching behind her ears. She licked my face in response, a vote of confidence I desperately needed. The dinner with Carolina turned into a regular occurrence. Weekly strategy sessions that often veered into her telling stories about growing up at Hillcrest, the secret passages she'd discovered, the parties her parents had hosted. "There used to be a pond," she told me one evening, spreading out ancient photos on my kitchen table. "Just beyond the east garden. My father had it filled in after my brother nearly drowned in it. But it was magical before that. Water lilies, frogs, even a small rowboat." I studied the yellowed photographs, seeing Hillcrest as it had been in its heyday. Gardens manicured, paint fresh, life in every window. "We could recreate it," I suggested. "Not exactly the same, but something similar, perhaps as a water feature rather than a swimming pond." Carolina's eyes lit up. "I'd like that. A nod to the past without being trapped by it." It became my pet project. Researching historical water gardens, consulting with landscape architects, designing something that honored the original while being distinctly new. I found myself looking forward to the work, to the challenge of creation rather than dwelling in what I'd lost. 6 months after the wedding that never was, Hillcrest hosted its first event, a garden party fundraiser for the local historical society. The house itself wasn't fully restored, but the grounds looked spectacular, with twinkling lights strung through trees and the first phase of the garden taking shape. I stood at the edge of the crowd, watching as Carolina charmed potential donors with tales of Hillcrest's storied past. The evening was mild, the setting sun painting everything gold, and for a moment I allowed myself to feel proud of what we'd accomplished. Quite a transformation. I turned to find Emma Chen, the town's most prominent real estate attorney, and someone I'd worked with on several projects. She was elegant in a simple black dress, champagne flute in hand. "Thanks. Still a long way to go, though." "The best projects always are." She smiled, inclining her head towards the manor. "I heard you were living on site now. Dedicated." "It's convenient," I shrugged. "Plus, Rosie likes the space to run." "Ah, yes, the famous Rosie. I've heard stories of her exploits from the contractors." This surprised me. "You know my contractors?" "Olivia Martinez is my cousin," she explained. "She says you're demanding but fair. High praise from her, believe me." I remembered Olivia, the sharp-eyed carpenter who'd been instrumental in restoring the original woodwork. "She's talented. Hillcrest wouldn't look half as good without her work." Emma nodded, studying me with an intensity that made me slightly uncomfortable. "You know, when I heard what happened with your wedding, I thought for sure you'd sell this place to the highest bidder and leave town. Most people would have." "I considered it," I admitted. "What changed your mind?" I looked out over the grounds, considering. "I guess I didn't want that to be the end of the story. For Hillcrest or for me." She smiled, something approving in her expression. "Good for you. Too many people let one bad chapter define their whole book." We spent the rest of the evening talking. About Hillcrest, about other historical properties in the area, about her work and mine. It was the longest conversation I'd had with anyone besides Carolina in months, and surprisingly, I enjoyed it. As guests began to leave, Emma handed me her card. "If you ever need legal advice about the property, or just want to grab coffee, give me a call." I stared at the card, recognizing an opening when I saw one. I'm not really in a good place for coffee," she repeated firmly. "No pressure, no expectations. Just two professionals who appreciate good architecture and better conversation." After she left, Carolina appeared at my side, eyebrows raised. "Emma Chen, huh? She doesn't usually attend these stuffy events." "You know her?" "This is still a small town at heart, Ethan. I know everyone." She patted my arm. "She's one of the good ones, smart as a whip and doesn't suffer fools." I pocketed the card, making no commitments even to myself. But later that night, as Rosie snored at the foot of my bed, I found myself thinking about Emma's words about not letting one bad chapter define the whole book. The next morning I called James. "Ethan?" He sounded shocked to hear from me. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said honestly. "But it might be someday. I need the contact information for that stonemason you worked with on the Glenfield project." A pause. "Sure, I can send that over. Is this for Hillcrest?" "Yes, we're restoring the original terraces." "We?" "Carolina Winters and I. She's a partner in the project now." Another pause. "That's great, Ethan, really. The place deserves someone who cares about it." The conversation was stilted, awkward, but it was a start. Not toward friendship again, perhaps never that, but toward a future where we could exist in the same town without one of us having to leave. 2 weeks later, I called Emma. We met for coffee, then lunch the following week, then a tour of a historic courthouse she was involved in preserving. It wasn't dating, not exactly, but it was something. A tentative step toward whatever came next. 1 year after the rehearsal dinner that had changed everything, Hillcrest Manor hosted its first wedding. The couple was young, nervous, radiantly happy in that way that both warmed and stung to witness. I stayed behind the scenes, managing logistics and staff, avoiding the ceremony itself. But as evening fell and the reception began, I found myself drawn to the ballroom where it was being held. String lights transformed the space, making it magical in a way I'd once envisioned for my own wedding. The bride and groom danced, lost in each other, while guests looked on with champagne and misty eyes. "You did this," Carolina said, appearing beside me. "You took a place of pain and made it a place of joy again, for them and for yourself." I watched the dancing couples, the laughing friends, the celebration of love and commitment that I'd once taken for granted. "Not quite there yet," I admitted, "but closer than I was." Later that night, after the last guest had departed and the staff was clearing up, I walked through the quiet house. In the ballroom, a few flowers remained scattered on the floor. The ghost of music seemed to linger in the air. I thought of Mia, of James, of the life I'd planned and lost. The pain was still there, but duller now, a scar rather than an open wound. And alongside it, something new had begun to grow. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but possibility. The sense that my story wasn't over, just taking an unexpected turn. I stepped outside onto the terrace, looking up at stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. Hillcrest stood solid behind me, no longer a symbol of betrayal but of resilience, of second chances. 6 months ago, I'd signed the property over to them in a gesture of hurt and anger. Now, through twists I could never have anticipated, it had come back to me transformed. Not just a building or business, but a purpose. A future I was actually looking forward to. "Not a bad view," Emma said, joining me on the terrace. She'd stopped by to drop off some documents and ended up staying to help with the wedding cleanup, something no lawyer I knew would normally do. "One of the best in the county," I agreed. "I meant the expression on your face just now. You looked peaceful." I considered this. Maybe I was, just for a moment. She smiled, not pushing, just standing beside me under the stars. After a while, she said, "You know, there's a historical society gala next month. Very boring, lots of wealthy old people talking about bygone eras. I don't suppose you'd want to be my +1? I turned to look at her, this woman who'd appeared in my life when I least expected it, who asked for nothing but seemed to understand everything. "I think I might," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. Later, walking back to my cottage with Rosie trotting ahead, I thought about the strange journey that had brought me here. How the worst day of my life had somehow led to a new beginning I couldn't have imagined. Mia and James had read their vows to each other on what should have been my wedding rehearsal, and I had impulsively signed Hillcrest over to them. But life had other plans. For the property, for them, and especially for me. As I reached my door, I looked back at the manor silhouetted against the night sky. It stood solid, enduring, beautiful in its imperfection. Like all of us, perhaps. Scarred but standing, ready for whatever came next. The woman I loved had chosen someone else. I had lost my best friend and the future I'd planned. But standing there under the stars, I realized with sudden clarity that I hadn't lost everything. In fact, in the strangest way, I might have found exactly where I was supposed to be all along. 2 years later. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. Simple cream cardstock with elegant black typography. Carolina Winters and the board of Hillcrest Manor request the pleasure of your company at the grand reopening celebration, Saturday, the 10th of June at 7 o'clock in the evening. I set it on the mantel of the cottage I still called home, though I spent most nights now at Emma's place in town. The cottage had become more office than residence, filled with plans and samples and the organized chaos of running Hillcrest. "Are you nervous?" Emma asked that evening, as we walked Rosie along the edge of the property, the manor glowing golden in the sunset. "About the reopening?" "A little," I admitted. 2 years of work coming down to one night. She squeezed my hand. 2 years of brilliant work. Everyone's going to be impressed. The restoration was complete. Every room furnished, every system updated, the grounds transformed with gardens, walking paths, and yes, a new pond where Carolina's childhood one had been. We'd already hosted small events, but the grand reopening was our official debut to the wider world, with travel writers and event planners flying in from across the country. "Did you invite them?" Emma asked carefully. She didn't need to specify who them was. "No," I said, "but Carolina might have. She handles the guest list." Emma nodded, not pressing. She understood, as she always did, the complicated emotions that still surfaced occasionally. We'd been dating for over a year, had even tentatively discussed moving in together officially, but some wounds healed slower than others. The night of the reopening arrived with perfect June weather. Warm but not hot, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of roses from the garden. I stood at the entrance, greeting guests in a suit that Emma had insisted on tailoring for the occasion. "You've done something remarkable here," the mayor told me, shaking my hand vigorously. "Put us back on the map." "It's been a team effort," I deflected, gesturing to Carolina, who was holding court in the main hall. As the evening progressed, I circulated through rooms I knew intimately, watching as people exclaimed over details I'd agonized over. The restored crown molding, the hand-painted ceiling in the music room, the view from the Widow's Walk. Every compliment felt like validation, not just of the work, but of the decision to stay, to rebuild, to move forward. "Mr. Mercer?" A server approached with a phone. "A call for you. The woman says it's urgent." Frowning, I stepped into a quiet alcove. "Hello?" "Ethan, it's Mia." My hand tightened on the phone. We hadn't spoken since that coffee shop goodbye 2 years ago, though I knew from mutual acquaintances that she was still in Seattle, doing well at her firm. "What's wrong?" I asked, because despite everything, the urgency in her voice still triggered concern. "Nothing's wrong," she said quickly. "I'm sorry to call like this, especially tonight. I saw the article about Hillcrest's reopening in the Times. Then why?" "I'm pregnant," she blurted. 4 months along. A girl." I leaned against the wall, blindsided. "Congratulations," I managed. "But I'm not sure why you're telling me." "Because I've been thinking about families," she said, her voice softening. about the past, about forgiveness. And I realized I never really apologized to you properly, not for the affair, which was unforgivable, but for the way I handled it, for hurting you so publicly, so callously. I closed my eyes, transported momentarily back to that ballroom, to the shock and humiliation. It was a long time ago. Not that long, she countered gently. And some hurts don't fade with time, they just become part of us. I wanted you to know that I understand that now, that I take full responsibility for the pain I caused, and that I'm truly, deeply sorry. The strange thing was, standing there in the house that had been the site of my greatest humiliation, and now my greatest professional triumph, I believed her. And more surprisingly, I found I no longer needed her apology. Thank you for saying that, I said finally. I hope you're happy, Mia. I mean that. A small sound, like a suppressed sob. Are you? Happy, I mean. I looked out the window to where Emma stood chatting with Carolina, her laugh carrying across the garden. I'm getting there, I said honestly. Different happy than I planned, but real. I'm glad, she said, and I could hear she meant it. You deserve that, Ethan, more than anyone. After we hung up, I stayed in the alcove a moment longer, processing. There was a time when a call like that would have devastated me, reopened wounds just beginning to heal. Now it felt like closing a chapter properly, with care instead of anger. Everything okay? Emma asked when I rejoined the party. You look like you've seen a ghost? Just a call from the past, I said. Nothing important. Her eyes searched mine, concerned. You sure? I smiled, taking her hand. Positive. Let's enjoy tonight. We earned it. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Carolina found me on the terrace, the same spot where Emma and I had stood after that first wedding. We did it, she said, clinking her champagne glass against mine. Not bad for a broken-hearted fool and a nostalgic old woman, I laughed. I prefer to think of us as visionaries. Visionaries, she repeated, considering. I like that. Seeing beyond what is to what could be. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the last guests stroll the illuminated gardens. I have a confession, Carolina said finally. When I first approached you about buying Hillcrest, it wasn't entirely about the property. I raised an eyebrow. No? No, I mean, I did want to save it, absolutely. But I also saw something in you that reminded me of myself at your age. That same stubborn determination not to be defined by loss. And now? She smiled, patting my arm. Now I see I was right to trust that quality. You've built something extraordinary here, Ethan. Not just a beautiful property, but a new life. That's no small thing. As she walked away to bid goodbye to the remaining guests, I stayed on the terrace, looking out over what we'd created. The gardens glowed with strategic lighting, pathways winding between beds of flowers and ornamental shrubs. The pond reflected the stars, its surface occasionally broken by the movement of fish we'd stocked earlier that spring. Beyond the formal gardens, work had begun on a new addition, a conservatory that would allow year-round events regardless of weather. Further still, land was being cleared for luxury cabins, expanding our capacity for retreats and extended stays. Hillcrest was growing, evolving, becoming more than I'd initially envisioned. Just as I had, in ways I couldn't have predicted that night, I stood watching Mia read her vows to James. Emma joined me, slipping her arm through mine. Ready to go home? Almost, I said, just taking it all in. She followed my gaze across the property. It's pretty magical tonight. It is. I turned to face her, this woman who had entered my life so unexpectedly. Thank you. For what? I just showed up and looked pretty. I smiled, touching her cheek. For seeing me at my worst and sticking around anyway. For understanding why this place matters, for... I gestured vaguely, searching for words. For loving you? She suggested softly. Yeah, I nodded. That... She kissed me lightly. Easy job, but you're welcome. We walked back through Hillcrest, turning off lights, checking locks, the familiar routine of caring for this place that had become so much more than a building to me. In the grand entry hall, I paused, remembering how I'd once carried renovation plans through these doors, excited to show Mia my surprise. Second thoughts? Emma asked, noticing my hesitation. No, I said, realizing it was true. Just remembering how different I thought my life would be by now. Disappointed? I considered this seriously, thinking of the pain and growth of the past 2 years, of the unexpected joy I'd found in rebuilding Hillcrest and myself. No, I decided. Different isn't worse. Sometimes it's better than what you planned. As we stepped outside, locking the grand doors behind us, I took one last look at Hillcrest Manor, the place where I'd lost everything and found something new. The place I'd impulsively signed away in hurt and anger, only to have it return to me transformed. The place that, like me, had been broken and rebuilt, emerging stronger and more beautiful than before. Not the ending I'd expected, but perhaps the one I needed all along. They say when one door closes, another opens. What they don't tell you is sometimes you have to build that door yourself, brick by brick, through pain and perseverance, and the stubborn belief that your story isn't over. Standing there with Emma, looking up at the stars above Hillcrest, I knew with certainty that mine was just beginning.